Hello, welcome back to the Chats and Chapters podcast and YouTube channel. I hope that you had a great Christmas. This episode is going live the day after Christmas, so I hope you had a very Merry Christmas if you celebrate. If you don't, I hope you had a great week. If you see me looking down, it's because I have notes, because I'm a note gal. Today I want to talk about how to set writing goals that you can actually accomplish in 2026. If you are like me, you have probably been thinking about goals, kind of what you want for the new year for the last month or so. I don't know. I tend to start early because I really like to let things settle and see how they feel, see if that's really what I want to go for, all of that good stuff. So if that is you, I want to go through some ways, some approaches, some ideas for how to set writing goals in 2026 that you can actually accomplish. So let's dive into it. Step one is going to be figuring out what your goal for 2026 is. What is your writing goal for 2026? Do you want to write your first book? Maybe you have had an idea for a book in the back of your head forever. Is that what you want to do? Do you want to write another book? Have you already written a book? Maybe you released your first, second, third, fourth book in 2025 and you are ready to write the next one. Or are you in the revising stages of one? Do you want to revise a book that maybe you worked on last year? What is your writing goal for 2026? That is the first step to kind of ponder on, figure out what it is. You might already know it. If you don't already know it, maybe watching this video will give you ideas and such as we go. Step two is going to be to look back on what you accomplished in 2025. I love doing this. I used to do a champagne toast every month. So every month at the last day of the month or the 30th of the month or the last Sunday of every month, go through and write down your wins, or at least think about your wins, because I think a lot of us have so many goals, so many wants, so many desires. We're, trying to do a million things all the time that we don't really take the time to sit back and appreciate everything that we have accomplished. We just continue thinking about what else we want to do. I'm guilty of it. I know I'm not the only one. So at this point, maybe you haven't written a book and your goal is to write your first book. What did you accomplish this year that set you up for that? There has to be something, whether you brainstormed, whether you did a brain dump, whether you started an outline, whether you bought a book on story structure. There's something that you did, or maybe you just have multiple notes in your notes app that have a lot of ideas and it's very scattered. Those things still count. So what did you accomplish this year? And on top of that, ask yourself, what went really well? What went really well? What worked? Did you try a new time management system? Did you start journaling? What went really well? What was hard in 2025? Was it time management? Because I know a lot of people struggle with that. I went through waves of doing really good and then waves of being why am I doing these things? So what went well, what was hard, and what can you do better? So if something was really hard, think of really simple ways to make that hard thing a bit easier. Maybe it was you didn't feel like you had time to write. So how can you create a little bit more space in your day-to-day to accomplish the writing goal that you want to set for 2026? If you're wanting to write your first book, and it's, like I said, it's been living in your brain for months or years, I want you to think about, why have you not written it yet? What has been stopping you? Once again, is it time? Is it other responsibilities? What are the obstacles that are in your way? And then how can you work through those obstacles? So when you're setting a goal, I do this for running. I do this for running all the time. I will use a lot of running and health and fitness analogies to maybe like help you and help me, because if you didn't know, I was a personal trainer. I was a health coach for 3 years. So a lot of it kind of like goes back to my roots in health and fitness. If you have this plan to write, you're going to sit down, but continuously you go over because you have to make breakfast, you have to get the kids ready, this, that, and the other, like you don't have time in the mornings. So it could either be you change your goal of writing in the mornings to you write on your lunch break, or you write in the evenings, or you save 30 minutes every night when the kids go down to write a little bit before you get ready and go to bed and clean up the house and do all of that stuff. Like that is an option. So you think through what could stop me, what could potentially go wrong, what could make me executing what I want to execute more difficult. So when I think about running and racing, I'm like, okay, what could go wrong? Well, there's a lot of things that could go wrong during a trail race. There's lack of nutrition. I run out of water, so I can stop at an aid station and fill back up on water. If it starts raining, I always start with a rain jacket. If I overheat, I'm going to have layers on. So I never wear like a really warm base layer as the only layer, because chances are, obviously, I'm going to warm up and I don't want to overheat. So you have to think of all the possibilities and maybe not put things in place to help, but at least have that in the back of your brain so that if it comes up, you're like, okay, if this happens, I pivot. If this happens, I pivot. And that way it makes it a lot easier. So you're not thinking everything is going to go perfectly hunky-dory all the time. And then when something does happen, when something does go wrong, because it is life, we are humans, it's going to happen, you aren't stuck like, oh, I thought this was going to go perfectly and now I don't know what to do. Think through the scenarios of what could go wrong and come up with ways to problem solve that and make it still possible. So that is very important. What has stopped you in the past? What are the obstacles, and how can you overcome those obstacles? If your goal is to write or revise a book and you've already written one, this is another thing that I use for race training, because using what went well and what didn't, how long do you think this is going to take you? So if you have already written a book, like I said, and you want to revise your second book, you're not a first-time author, and it took you 8 months to go through your revisions for the first book last year, year before, whenever that happened. If it took you 8 months and you were a little bit stressed, you were a little bit cut close to the deadline, all of that, take into account all of your responsibilities, your job, your kids, having fun on the weekends, going out to brunch, spending time with your partner. Take all of that into account. And once you get a rough timeline, maybe a estimate of how many hours a week you can actually concentrate on revisions or writing this book. Once you get your timeline set that you think will work, add at least a month to it. Add at least a month to whatever timeline you come up with, because stuff will come up and it is way better to be ahead of schedule than falling behind and panicking. So once you have your timeline, your end goal, whether that is a publication date, whether that is the date, if you're doing revisions and you want to get your manuscript to your editor, so whether that is an editor start date, a publication date, or a race date, like I always say, you work backwards. So when I get a race in my head that I want to run, I'm like, okay, what are the 16 to 20 weeks before that going to look like? I need to peak before, I need to taper the week before, and then gradually increase my mileage up to whatever race distance I am doing before the race. So you want to do the same thing. You want to have your publication date in mind, or the date that you want your editor to start. I suggest reaching out to your editor to make sure that they have availability depending on what date you want. Once you have your end date in mind, you have your end goal, work backwards. So your final step is going to be probably another line edit pass on your manuscript before you give it to your editor. You're going to want it proofread before you get it published. So work backwards with all of the steps that you're going to need to accomplish before that date is done. And that in and of itself, your timeline that you thought was going to work, that worked on your first one, kind of, you might have to switch things, or you might actually be faster on this next book, on this next set of revisions, because you've already done it. So typically you get quicker, you get more efficient, you get better at it, you know what to expect, you know your writing, you know how revisions go. So it could go either way, but once you have that end date in mind, you have that end goal, then you can just work backwards through the current date, and that will give you stepping stones to go through as you're getting ready to finalize that last publication date or editor start date or whatever, like even finishing your first draft. That is completely an option. If your date is not goal centric, you can reflect on what you accomplished this year and then just raise the bar a little bit, just a little bit. Here's the thing. The main goal with goal setting is not to always hit every single one of them. The goal is to make it realistic, but also stretch a little bit, because the chances are, by you setting a goal, whether that is to write your first draft in 2026 or publish your first book or publish your second book or finally reach out to an editor or whatever your goal is for 2026, chances are if you don't hit the goal, whether it's by your date or the date that you wanted or at all, you'll come a lot closer to it just from setting the goal. And that is a win. That is a win. Okay, now that we have the brainstorming out of the way, you know your goal, you have at least a rough timeline of how you're going to make this work. The biggest thing I want you to think about as you're going through setting your writing goals, really any goals, is what is your everyday life going to look like on your journey to accomplishing this goal? Because it's very fun to set exciting goals, get really excited and say, yeah, I'm going to write my first draft and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be great. And then when you get down to it every single day, you're like, oh God, this is taking so long and this, that, and the other. And I can't think of anything, or I want to change the whole thing, or this story is stupid, or whatever you're thinking. I want you to focus on, what is your everyday life going to look like? Do you have the luxury to wake up in the morning and have a cup of coffee while you brainstorm what you want to write for the day? Are you going to write during your lunch breaks 3-4 times a week? Is that going to get you to what you want to do? Are you going to say no to family functions or going out for long nights with your friends on the weekends because that's the only free time that you have within your work schedule? And that is a sacrifice, a trade-off, if you will, that you are going to make. So I think very granularly about this because, once again, going back to running an ultra marathon, so that's any distance over 26.2, running a trail ultra marathon sounds really fun. It sounds really fun. It sounds really cool. I'm like, I'm such a badass. I can't wait to do that. It's going to be great. But the reality of it is not always fun. It is not always fun. I have to force myself to run. I have to run a lot. Sometimes running gets really boring. I don't want to go. My knee hurts. My calves hurt. I have to eat a lot because I'm doing a lot of activity. I also have to balance that with running my business. And so it is looking at my everyday life week by week. How am I going to fit this goal into what I already have on my plate as just existing as a human being and running a business? So really break it down. If you are able to drink your coffee and go over, maybe skim the last 4 to 5 pages that you wrote the day before while you're drinking your coffee, and then that gets your brain back into momentum. You remember where you are in the story, all of that, and then you start writing once you've had your coffee in the morning. Or like I said at the beginning, if you are going to be writing at night, do you make like a nice chamomile tea and start winding down at the end of the night and writing your story? Like, how is your day-to-day life going to look? Maybe you're writing in the pickup line. What is it called? The car pickup line? I don't know. I don't have kids. I don't know. But maybe you can take your laptop or you can take your phone and have your notes app. And that's when you're jotting down ideas, you're figuring out dialogue, you're describing your characters. Like maybe that is where you have a 30-minute chunk of time where you're sitting still before you pick up the kids. How is it going to look day to day? Because at some point, you're not going to be having fun. You're going to want to quit. You're going to think it's a bad idea. You're going to think that you are not going to be able to accomplish it. So you have to go back to your main goal of what you want. You want this book written. You want the revisions. You want the editor to start. You want your readers to see it. You want to just write it for yourself. It doesn't matter. If no one's ever going to read it, it doesn't matter. What is your main goal and how can you integrate processes, systems into your everyday life to accomplish this goal in 2026. Hope that this episode was helpful. This is the framework that I use when I goal set for myself, for races, for business goals, for projects. Like once I get a project and I have an end date, I'm going through and I'm like, okay, this is the number of pages that I need to complete every day with 2 to 3 days of a buffer so I can finalize everything, make sure it's good. Because like I said, inevitably something is going to come up. So if I miss a day, then I'm not behind, I'm still fine because I've built in that buffer for everything. And that's the same way with my running program. I am repeating some weeks just to build my base, have that, and I have plenty of time. So I hope that you found this episode helpful. If you have a writing goal that you already know, if you found this helpful, anything like that, please leave it in the comments below. If you are watching on YouTube, if you are listening on the podcast, please share this with someone. Leave me a comment. You can leave me a comment on Spotify as well. And thank you so much for listening. Once again, I really hope you found this helpful. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you on the next episode.